All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Heather from the Madison Heights Public Library, and today we have with us Erin Wallace from Balance Your Fitness. Erin today is going to talk to us about what we can do to de-stress our minds and bodies. Welcome, Erin.
Well, thank you so much, Heather, and to the rest of the Madison Heights Public Library staff for setting this up. I know everyone here has hopefully maybe getting used to the new technology. Hello to everyone on online on YouTube and other video streaming networks. And so today what I wanted to be able to talk about is helping to understand a little bit more things that we can be able to do basic things that we can be able to do in our lives, in our homes, to be able to help cope with the stressors of everyday life. As you can see in sort of the current environment, we are dealing with a lot of different mental emotional stressors. So today's presentation hopefully can help you understand a little bit more about what's physiologically going on with your body and how we can best be able to go and handle our own health and wellness needs, and things that you don't necessarily need to be buying a bunch of supplements or buying a bunch of different how would I say, these sort of miracle cures or things of that nature. We want to be able to teach you things that you can do for yourself at your own home. And if you stay through to the end of the video, I'm offering a free gift to everyone who watches the video. So please go ahead. And also, if you have any questions, I'll have my contact information as well. I'll have a little question and answer session at the end. Live, but also if you have questions, you can always directly contact me through my website, balanceyourfitness.com. I also have a Facebook page as well. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So go ahead, Heather, and we'll pull up the presentation so everyone can see some of the slides that I'll be talking about. All right, so I am what's called, if you've never heard of this before, I'm what's called a CHEK practitioner. And so if you've never heard of a CHEK practitioner before, the acronym CHEK stands for Corrective Holistic Exercise Kinesiology. And so when I'm asked to put that in a one-sentence answer, is that imagine a postgraduate program protocol. My undergrad is through Alma College. I have a Bachelor's of Science in Exercise and Health Science from Alma College. If you're not familiar with Alma College, it is about 3 cornfields north of Michigan State University and about 2 cornfields south of Central Michigan University. So if you've ever heard, you might have heard of Alma. If you're familiar with it, you kind of get the joke. There's not much out there. But again, that's where my undergraduate work is from. My postgraduate work is through the CHEK Institute. So if you were to go and think about it, is imagine someone who utilizes the techniques of physical therapy, massage therapy, exercise, nutrition and lifestyle coaching, and other different forms of stress management all in one place. So go ahead and you can put up the next slide there. There, Heather.
There we go.
So what we want to be able to help realize, as this slide represents, is that each person is their own set of physical, chemical, mental, emotional, and spiritual stressors. So when people are dealing with chronic health problems, no matter whether that's things like diabetes, high blood pressure, could be things like chronic pain or thyroid issues, it could be mental, emotional stress issues, is that every one of these stressors that you have, no matter whether it's physical, like I am dealing with some form of chronic joint pain, whether it's chemical, like I'm eating foods that are perhaps not as good for my physiology as they should be, whether it's mental emotional stress, like, I don't know, the things going on right now, or other different forms of stressors. They all summate in the body, meaning that they all create the same chemical response in the body to release the same sort of hormones, no matter what type of stressor it is. So when most people think of stressors, we think of the mental emotional kind, like being stuck on 75 during rush hour traffic. And, you know, I think a lot of people have had a lot of prayers saying, please God, I never want to deal with 75 traffic again. Maybe there's a sense of humor in that now that we never have to deal with I-75 traffic again. If you guys are from somewhere other than the Detroit area and you're not familiar, just insert any form of interstate that you get stuck in traffic. Maybe, you know, if you're in California, maybe the 5 or something like that. But let's just say that that there's a lot of different forms of stress other than the ones that we normally think about. So go ahead and click through to the next slide, Heather. Is that when we think about the physical responses to stress, every one of those stressors, no matter whether it's physical, chemical, mental, emotional, or spiritual, we end up going and producing more stress hormones. And the 2 major stress hormones that we produce are cortisol and adrenaline. So cortisol is your body's main form of stress hormone to respond to a physical fight or flight response. So our bodies have adapted over tens of thousands of years to be able to go and handle these type of survival type of stressors. So imagine a tiger walks into your room and there's no Carol Baskin there to save you. That's a little Netflix Tiger King joke there. She's not there to save you. But so what happens is that we have to be able to go and either have our body prepped to either run from the tiger or fight the tiger. So our responses have to be able to go and have that basic fight or flight response. So some of the things that happen is that we want to be able to make sure that we can have enough short-term energy resources to be able to go and allow for the basic muscular contractions that are necessary to be able to go and avoid that stressor. However, every form of stress that we end up going and are exposed to, physical, chemical, mental, emotional, etc., have the same sort of response. Our body chemically, internally, thinks we're constantly running from the tiger, okay? And so that's what we want to be able to realize, is that even though you mentally know, right, that this isn't a tiger or some form of, immediate survival stress that I'm dealing with. This is what our body internally is taking it as. So what happens is that as we build up these stressors over and over and over and over, sort of like that overflowing coffee cup that we saw from the previous slide, is that these types of stressors build up over time. And some of these responses that I have listed here are things that happen to our bodies. So when we run out of these resources, we break down our muscle tissue to turn it into sugar. So our muscles are a main protein store in our body. So we have a store of protein in our musculature. However, if we're constantly under stress and we're not going and fueling our body to handle that stress, we break down our muscle to be able to turn it into sugar and other resources to be able to handle that stress. So that what that means for our body is that we end up being more inflamed. So we break down our muscle tissue, we create more inflammation in the body. So we end up going and putting ourselves at more risk for other different inflammatory diseases. We also end up becoming more inflamed in our joints, so we end up having more issues with chronic pain. So the more that we end up having issues with back, neck, knees, shoulder types of pain syndromes, these types of stressors can sort of spiral into themselves. So you end up having some more stress from one area, and because of that, you end up spiraling the stress into other different forms of stress in other different areas. So you can have a chemical stressor or a mental emotional stressor that spirals into more physical ones. And you've probably felt that before if you've had a stressful day, and then all you notice are all sorts of tension and tightness in our neck and shoulders. That's a lot of times where people tend to have it, but you can see these sort of things happen. The second part of the slide, you says it lowers your thyroid. So if you guys aren't familiar, if you anything out there are familiar with what your thyroid is, your thyroid is a small gland that actually sits in your neck, And it's responsible for being able to go and produce the hormones that actually regulate your metabolism. So everyone wants to be able to have a high metabolism, right? Because we want to be able to go and have the bodies and the physical aesthetic look that everyone sees on television, right? And just to let you know that the people that are the most stressed out mental emotionally, think of healthcare workers, right? So doctors, physicians, and ER, and Hollywood likes to make it think that everyone looks like the people on Grey's Anatomy. Where, all the doctors end up looking like, models and movie stars. Well, unfortunately, because of the stressors that they deal with on a daily basis in real life, that's not the way that most stressed healthcare workers, what their bodies end up going and adapting to. That type of stress ends up actually lowering your body's ability to go and have a overall longer and bigger metabolic rate. What happens overall is that the more stress hormones that you pump out, the lower your metabolism goes. And how that works is that if you think about this on an evolutionary scale, our bodies had to adapt 10,000 years ago when there wasn't a McDonald's on every corner, right? So if there's not a McDonald's on every corner and you had to go and hunt for your food, sometimes that hunter-gatherer doesn't find food on a consistent basis. So you may go and your hunt produces a lot of food for a short period of time. And then there's not a lot of food. So you go and switch from sort of feast and famine conditions over time. So what happens is our bodies have had mechanisms to be able to go and increase our metabolism when we have the food and lower it when we don't, so we don't end up starving. Our thyroid hormones are actually part of that process. So one of the things that our cortisol and our stress hormones do when we don't have a lot of food is to break down muscle to turn it into sugar so our bodies stay functioning. However, what happens when that cortisol rises is that it actually goes and lowers our thyroid hormones to be able to lower our metabolism because our bodies think that there's not a lot of food around. And so what happens is by lowering that metabolism, we can end up going and surviving when there's not a lot of food around. And if you flash back into a hunter-gatherer 10,000 years ago style symptom where we just didn't have food consistently. However, we do have food consistently. But when our bodies think that these things are happening, it can lower our overall metabolism long term and make it to where we end up storing more body fat and it's harder to lose weight. Another thing that happens is that we lower sex hormone production. So a lot of times people, when they go and as they age, they lower the amount of testosterone and progesterone and estrogen that they produce over time. A lot of that has to do with the fact that cortisol and our stress hormones compete with us in our bodies for the same resources. So they need the same nutrients a lot of times to be able to make your stress hormones versus your sex hormones. So if you end up going and utilizing all of your resources to produce your stress hormones, there's not a lot left over to be able to produce testosterone, progesterone, estrogen, etc. So a lot of times people who take medicines to be able to replace testosterone or to replace estrogen or progesterone, one of the things that we want to be able to do is that along with being able to follow your doctor's guidance is what can we do outside of taking a bunch of medicines and taking a bunch of pills that can be able to go and help us address these issues in a more holistic manner. So the more so as we talked about as well, the more inflammation that we have, the more risk that we have of chronic diseases such as heart disease, diabetes, etc. So I've gone through a little bit of the scary bit, but it's hopefully be able to understand a little bit of the metabolic, how our metabolism works and how our physiology works, to be able to go and say more stress equals some of these other different chronic health and disease issues. All right, go ahead and the next slide there. So here's a way to be able to go and see, are our emotions affecting us physically? So this is an abbreviated version of the questionnaire that I give to every single new person that I work with, new patient that we work with. What we want to be able to go and see is, are some of the mental emotional stressors affecting other different physical parts of our body? So when you're looking at this slide, all I want you to do is to be able to go And just, if you answer yes to any of these questions, you give yourself a point. And so what I want you to be able to do is, you know, you don't have to go and physically comment in the comment section on YouTube or physically answer here, you know, what ones you answered yes to, but just keep in mind how many questions that you answered yes to. The first question, do you eat more or less than when stressed than when not stressed? Do you worry over job, income, or money problems? Do we often feel anxious? Do we often feel upset when things go wrong or feel that things go wrong often? Do we lash out at others? Do we feel our sex drive is lower than normal for you? Have we had a reduced contact with friends, feeling antisocial, or an increase in contact because you feel like you need to vent your frustrations to others? Do we feel isolated or suffer from loneliness? Do we take any form of medication prescribed by a physician directly or indirectly related to stress or a psychological disorder? Do we lose more than 2 days of work a year due to illness? If you answered 1 to 3 questions yes, this is a beginning starting point to go and say, you know what, my body's trying to tell me something. So if you're answering 1 to 3 questions yes, you're probably not going and having, for example, massively high amounts of blood pressure or issues with diabetes or other different issues like other different chronic disease issues. But it doesn't mean that there aren't still actions that we can take to be able to go and head these chronic diseases off at the pass. So the idea is to be able to go, and when you start to feel like, you know what, I'm feeling upset and you know, I'm feeling I'm lashing out more, you know, these are things that we can be able to go and say, you know what, maybe I need to be able to look at some of these stressors in my life and they're starting to affect me. Now, if you're answering 4 to 7 yes, and then we're starting to be able to go and say, you know what, I'm starting to get into the chronic disease state setup to where I need to be able to really go and focus and really start to work on avoiding the path of going into disease and being able to go and start to work on some of these different stress reduction issues and looking at the sources of my stress and be able to go and say, how can we lower the amount of coffee in the coffee cup, so to speak, from the previous slide. And again, it could be physical, it could be chemical, it could be mental, emotional, it could be spiritual stressors that you're dealing with. The idea is to find out which ones are your stressors that you're dealing with. And that realizing that what's going on with one person or what's going to work for one person isn't going to work for the next. So that's why we want to be able to go and understand that where you're answering yes on some of these questions is going to be different person to person. So when if you're answering 7 to 10, we're definitely needing some form of intervention when it comes to being able to go and lowering the stress in our life, because if we don't, we're going to be heading down the road of a lot more issues with chronic disease and you know, just a lower quality of life in general. So go ahead, Heather, you can go ahead and go on the next slide. So again, being able to manage stress, being able to go and say that, realizing that we do have physical, mental, emotional, chemical, and spiritual stressors. We all have a job, right? We all have careers that we have to be able to accomplish. And some of them actually are somewhat stressful, right? So for example, if you're going out there and you're a healthcare worker, right? And you're working in a stressful environment, you know, you can't just quit your job because of the fact that you still got to be able to go and have an income to pay your mortgage and to put food on the table, or you'll else end up having other different stressors. So we have to be able to realize that each person's going to be able to go and say, all right, what's the type of stressors that we want to be able to work on? Or how can we best be able to go and manage the stressors that we're dealing with? So there's a lot of different techniques that we want to be able to go and teach to be able to do that. So let's go on to the next slide, Heather. And being able to go and first understand that the most important part about being able to go and reduce your stressors is being able to go and understand how to breathe properly. So a lot of times when as we go and progress through life, we actually start to go and reverse the actual stress reduction form of breathing. So before I go and teach any of this, I want everybody at home to be able to start by just placing one hand on your chest here and one hand on your belly button. And from this position, what I would like you to do is I want you to take a deep breath in through your nose. So deep, slow breath in and exhale. Now I want you to feel where that breath started to come from first. Which hand moved first? So did we feel our chest hand moving first, or did we feel our belly hand moving first? Or maybe both at the same time. So Heather, I'm going to ask you that. So which hand did you feel moving first when you did that?
The first time I did it, I felt it at the same time, but I did it again because I wasn't paying attention the first time, and I felt it in my belly.
All right, good. So what happens a lot of times when we start to breathe, right, is as we inhale, a lot of times when we're overly stressed, we'll tend to breathe through our chest and our neck. So you'll see a lot of breathing where it's up with the shoulders like this. Very short, shallow breathing.
Mm-hmm.
However, if we start to breathe with what's called our diaphragm, what's called diaphragmatic breathing, when we breathe with our belly. So what happens when we breathe through our diaphragm is the muscle that basically separates the lungs and heart compartment of our organs with our stomach and our intestines, the digestive portion of our organs. And when it contracts, it pulls the lungs downward, right? And pushes down on your abdominal contents, so actually your belly ends up going forward when you breathe in. So that breathing with the diaphragm actually ends up going and stimulating the relaxation portion of your nervous system. So when you actually go and you breathe about 10,000 times a day, if we go and create a practice where we're working on breathing through our belly, we start to stimulate the chemical de-stressing portion of our nervous system. So when we're then going and we're breathing that way consistently day in and day out, what can happen is that we end up lowering the chemical response, or lowering the amount of chemical stressors that we're dealing with on a daily basis. You may still have the stressful drive. We may still go and be dealing with the fact that we can't leave our houses. We may still be dealing with the fact that we have relationships in our lives that are causing us stress. But what that does is it lowers the amount of coffee in the cup, so to speak. And the other stressors that we're dealing with don't feel quite so overwhelming. So a lot of times when we feel that overwhelming sense of just everything's bearing down on us, it's because that coffee cup is overflowing, so to speak. And so our body's looking for ways to be able to go and handle that. So a lot of times that emotional, just feeling overloaded is a way for us to be able to go and be able to actually get rid of excess cortisol through tears. And in fact, one of my best friends from the CHEK Institute actually wrote a book. It's called What's in a Tear. And it's an ebook that you can shop for if you'd like to read it. But one of the chemical structures that's actually in tears is actually stress hormones, cortisol. And so it's actually one of our body's ways to be able to shed excess cortisol is through tears. And
Wow.
when we cry. So one of the things that we want to be able to help understand with that anecdote is to be able to go and say that we all have stresses in our lives. What can we do in the other portions of our lives, whether it's physical or chemical stressors that we can lower, to be able to go and say, you know what, I can then be able to start to handle my mental emotional stressors a little bit easier. So go ahead and go to the next slide. So one of the things as well that we can be able to do is be able to go and lower stress by moving. So a lot of times we think of movement as a way to be able to go and lower stress. These are what we call at the CHEK Institute, or what are called zone exercises, meaning that they are meant to be able to go and work on lowering the overall stress in our body for other different basic mental emotional stressors that we're dealing with. So each of the zones end up working on different types of mental emotional stress that we may be feeling. So the basic one we call zone 1, and there's a lot of different exercises like this. So when I'm demonstrating these de-stressing exercises today, just remember that there's a lot of different ones that we can do. You don't have to do all of them. You can pick one that works best for you. But I don't want people to start going and choosing one and then they go and say, well, you know what, my knees hurt after I did the breathing squats. Man, you know, that means I must not be able to de-stress. So what I want you to be able to realize is that when I'm demonstrating these exercises, make sure that if there's any pain or discomfort that you feel when you're doing them, don't do that one that causes you pain and discomfort. So as a little disclaimer before we start out and I start demonstrating these, is to just make sure to go and listen to your body. If your body's feeling pain during them, obviously don't do them. So what I'm going to go and show is how we use what I call, you might describe it as movement as meditation. When we think of meditating, we think of people sitting on rocks with their legs crossed and holding a position for long periods of time. And that's not necessarily the way that we can be able to go and necessarily need to be able to go or have to meditate, or it's actually not even recommended for people to just sit around while doing meditation, because sometimes they end up having joint pain while they're sitting and holding these positions. So these exercises I want to be able to show are ways that we can be able to lower stress, and everyone can be able to pick out at least one of these that we can be able to do for ourselves. So this one is more geared towards working on the adrenal glands. So the adrenal glands are the ones that actually produce the stress hormones. So being able to help regulate these better is something that this zone exercise can help us with. And this is what's called a breathing squat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to step back a little bit so you guys can have a better view of being able to see this exercise performed. Apologize, my chair was a little loud there. So what we're going to do is with a breathing squat, what we're going to do is just spread out our feet a little wider than shoulder width apart, and we're going to go and use that breathing that we just practiced. So we're inhaling, letting the belly go forward, exhaling, letting it come back in. So whenever we do one of these movements, we're going to inhale as we extend the body and exhale as we flex the body. So we're going to inhale as we come up into the squat. We're going to raise our arms up. And then we're going to exhale as we squat down towards the floor and come down. We're going to inhale up as we bring our body back up, and exhale as we bend our knees and letting our body come back down. Inhale up and exhale down. So now when most people think of exercise, we think of moving fast, right? So when people are doing squats at the gym, they're going super fast, like they're squatting up and down like this, right? So they're coming back and forth really, really fast. When we do these zone exercises, the key is to be able to go and move with the pattern of our breathing. You can go ahead and hit the next slide, Heather. Now we're going to go and work on another one. This one's for more of working with pain in the mid or lower back, as well as being able to help with issues of sex hormone production. A lot of times issues with make sure the nerves are functioning that innervate those areas. So one of the things that we want to be able to do with this exercise is being able to improve the flexibility of the pelvis and the lumbar spine, which again, the nerves coming out of those areas help to be able to innervate not just the sex organs, but also issues with colon and bowels and digestive improvement as well. So one of the things we want to be able to do is this is what's called pelvic rocking. So in the picture, you see the person with their hands on their hips looking straight forward. And what we're going to do is as I inhale and I'm going to extend my spine, I'm going to take my pelvis and tip it back. So what I imagine, like if your pelvis is like a bowl, right? And imagine you're taking that bowl and tipping it forward. Like imagine there's like this bowl of water and you're tipping it forward to pour water out of the bowl. And then we're going to tip it back to fill the bowl back up. So imagine like imagine this coffee cup, right? So imagine this coffee cup is your pelvis. We're going to tip it forward and then tip it back. So if I show that with the pelvis, I'm going to inhale, I'm going to tip it back. or tip it forward and then tipping it back. So as I inhale, I'm sticking the butt out, and I'm exhaling, I'm tucking the pelvis back in. So all this movement is meant to do is being able to go and help improve mobility and flexibility at these particular joints. So you can go ahead with the next slide there, Heather. The next one is what's called the Tai Chi energy push. So now, if anyone out there has ever practiced or Tai Chi before, you might be familiar with this particular movement. This helps with being able to help improve the function of the digestive system, so stomach, pancreas, liver, etc. As we do this, we're going to be able to go and help with keeping the spine mobile at the areas in which these organs are innervated. So when I stand back up, what I'm going to do is as I go and I inhale, I'm going to slowly bring my hands up the body, letting the belly go forward. And then as I exhale, I'm going to slowly push my hands forward. So if anyone's ever familiar with Tai Chi, you'll be familiar with this exercise. Inhaling, belly goes forward, exhale, pushing the hands. And as I do these in repetition, I'm going to add a little bit of rotation as I push. Inhale. And exhale. All right, go ahead with the next slide there. So now, this one is one you can be able to do lying down. This is really good for what's called for upper back and scapular pain. So this particular setup, I'm actually just going to show it while we're sitting down here, but you want to be able to follow the instructions that you see here, where you're laying down on your side with some form of a pillow, or in the picture you see is a foam roller. If you've been to gyms before, or perhaps physical therapy before, you might be familiar with that type of piece of equipment. But you're going to lay down with your head supported on your side, with your knees making a 90-degree angle with both your legs together. And in this position, you see the person laying down with both hands together in this position. So as you're laying down in this position, what you're going to do is that top hand, you're going to inhale and slowly drag your hand up and across your body till you reach your opposite shoulder. And you're going to let your head turn along with it, and then exhale, and then return to the starting position. Inhale, letting your body turn, exhale, returning to the starting position. So this helps with the mobility of the thoracic spine, where the heart and lungs are innervated as well as the thymus gland, which is responsible for producing the immune system response. And I don't know if you know this, but with the pandemic going on, having a strong immune system is important. So what we want to be able to help with as well is this exercise you might have heard was called the Feldenkrais exercise, which is a sort of a famous one in physical therapy circles. So if you've ever been to physical therapy for your upper back or your neck, you might be familiar with this as well. So if you when you're doing these, all of these movements should be done breathing in, breathing out very slowly. Go ahead with the next slide. So now this one's what's called lower cervical mobilization. So this will help with a lot of people who have neck and shoulder pain and discomfort. So this helps with mobilizing the joints of the neck that innervate the thyroid gland with metabolism and also regulation of calcium. So if you have issues with thinning bones as we grow older, this can help with that as well. So with this exercise, all you're going to be doing is you can do this seated, standing, or lying down. And what you're going to do is, I'm going to back up so it'll be a little easier to see, is you're going to start with both hands, with one hand with your thumb pointed up, and the other hand's going to have your thumb pointed down. And I'm going to start by turning my head to look at the down thumb. And as I inhale, I'm going to turn my head and then rotate my hands at the same time. So my opposite hand now that had the thumb up is now pointed down, and the other one that was down is now pointed up. So I'm inhaling and exhaling. There you go. Sorry about that. That's what happens when you don't put your phone on mute, as I thought I did. So I'm inhaling and exhaling. Inhaling and exhaling. So you can do this lying down, you can do it seated, and that will be able to go and help quite a bit with being able to help lower the amount of stress that we're dealing with, and also be able to go and help with avoiding stress with our neck, our shoulders, and helping out with the function of our thyroid gland and our metabolism as well. The last one, you can go ahead and go to the next slide, is one that will help with sleep regulation. So a lot of people out there that might be having issues of being able to fall asleep or stay asleep. This is a great technique for that. This is called alternating nostril breathing. So this also helps with headaches and sometimes upper cervical pain and chronic migraines. So what we want to be able to do is you're going to close one nostril, right? Not in the nostril, but outside of it, right? So no picking the nose. You're going to close one nostril and you're going to breathe in through that other nostril like this. And then you're going to switch nostrils on the exhale. Then we're going to inhale. And then switch nostrils on the exhale. And make sure that as you're breathing in and breathing out, inhaling, letting the belly go forward. Exhaling, letting the belly relax. So with that, that'll be our last exercise. So any one of those relaxation exercises you can be able to use on a daily basis to be able to help lower the amount of mental, emotional stress that you're dealing with. So go ahead on to the next slide there. So I will go ahead and open it up for question and answer at this point. But before I do that, I wanted to be able to thank everyone who stayed long enough to be able to go and do this. And I know I'm running out of time with the length of the Zoom meeting. So can you go ahead to the next slide there? Is there another slide? There you go. Is that as a thank you, and I know that everyone's kind of worrying about money in these stressful times, and they also have their health on their minds, that anybody who watches this can be able to contact me and get up to $200 in free services as a thank you for attending. These services will be remote services, but again, we'll have $200 in free services as a thank you for attending to help start that path to a healthier you. So thank you again for everyone for attending, and now we'll go ahead and open it up to any questions to who are listening live. If you have any other questions that you want to go and ask, you can ask them. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can put this in the comments section of the Madison Heights Public Library. I'll make sure to be able to answer it. But with that, you can go ahead and open it up to questions, Heather. Anyone, Heather or Russ, do you guys have any questions?
I don't have any questions, but I think this is really helpful, easy things that we can do to help ourselves relax. I mean, I definitely have noticed that, you know, being home for a couple of weeks, I have a lot of lower back pain that I did not have before. And, you know, so I'm definitely going to try these out.
Good. And so you try them out and make sure that you go and you listen, you know, look at these and go and say, which one feels the best to me? How do I feel as I'm doing them? Mm-hmm. And you go with the ones that feel the best to you. Remember that they're what's going to work for one person is not going to work for everyone. So make sure that you go and you pick the ones that are best for you.
Some of these are similar to yoga some of the yoga moves.
I thought
Somewhat
that too.
similar. One of the things that you'll notice is that when you talk about yoga versus what we're doing here, is that a lot of times when you're in a group class with yoga, right, is that you've got to be able to go and sometimes we try to be able to keep up with the Joneses in some of the types of group classes, right? So it's like, all right, well, we're going to go and get into a certain pose or do a certain type of exercise, and it may be too advanced or perhaps difficult to be able to go and try. So when I put these up here, they're meant to be able to go and have a lot of the same principles as other different disciplines, yoga or Tai Chi especially. And they're meant to be able to go and help with lowering the chemical stress response that we have in our body. So that way our body feels more relaxed and we're able to go and handle the stressors of daily life much more easily. But yes, you see that there are some carryover to that, and that we want to be able to have as many tools in the toolbox as possible. When I work with people individually or in a group, we want to be able to go and have not just techniques from exercise or techniques from nutrition or manual therapy. We want to be able to have as many of those in the toolbox. So, but yeah, I appreciate I know I got less than a minute to go, so I'm going to wrap it up. Is that I just want to be able to thank everyone for attending today, and I look forward to a future seminar. Remember to post your questions if you have them, and thank you so much for your time, and thank you, Heather, and the Madison Heights Public Library for putting this on.
Yep, you're welcome, and thanks for joining us. And
you're welcome. You guys, everyone, stay safe and have a great and happy Easter.
Yeah,
thank you.
To you. Thank you.